There is a line drawn in ice and granite along Europe's far north, and on one side of it stands a country smaller than St. Petersburg's metro area, yet armed with more artillery than any other Western European state, more bomb shelters than some continents, and a national temperament summed up in one untranslatable word: sisu, the quiet confidence of Finland. Forests drinking the wind, lakes stitched like mirrors between black pines, highways disappearing into snow, masks a hard lesson of the 20th century. When empires come calling, Finns don't flinch, they prepare. And in 2025, after joining NATO and upgrading nearly every lever of national power, Finland has become the worst possible answer to a very old Russian question. Imagine a column of armored vehicles grinding into a white tunnel of trees. The sun is low, the temperature punishing. The forest is still until it isn't. One shot, then a dozen, then 100. Tires rip, optics shatter, GPS falters, radios hiss. The column halts, turns, fragments. A minute later, the snow is silent again, except for the wind. That is Finland's battlefield. A cold maze where attackers get lost and defenders never do. The Winter War lives in Finnish bone marrow. In 1939, the Soviet Union attacked with numbers that should have decided the war on day one. Instead, in woods and marshes, on skis and behind white sheets, the Finns turned terrain into a weapon and logistics into a liability. They lost land and thousands of lives but kept the country. The lesson wasn't mythic bravery. It was method, camouflage, mobility, decentralized command, and a national will that refused to accept fate. That experience still shapes the Finnish psyche and force design, because in Finland, history isn't a chapter, it's doctrine. Centuries of tension on this frontier sharpened everything else. Borders shifted, Moscow loomed, Helsinki hedged, and during the Cold War, Finland learned to be neutral without being naive. It built a military that could mobilize overnight, and a civil defense system that would survive the first week of any war. The neighbors noticed, so did Moscow. Finland is a natural fortress, an obstacle course designed by an engineer with a sense of humor and a love of winter sports. 70+% of the land is forest. Tens of thousands of lakes and swamps puncture the ground like trapdoors. Road networks thread through trees that double as cover and artillery concealment. In winter, the country can freeze into a single creaking weapon. For an invader, this isn't simply bad terrain. It's the strategic equivalent of playing an away game in a labyrinth. Total defense is not a slogan here. It's city planning. Beneath Helsinki, metro stations, car parks, sports halls, and rock caverns transform on command into civil defense shelters that can host nearly the entire capital. And across the country, there are around 50,500 shelters with space for roughly 4.8 million people. If you're wondering whether any other European capital can tuck its citizens underground before lunch, the answer is basically Helsinki can. The rest are taking notes. One guide joked the shelters double as the world's most secure sauna queue. Finns laughed, then checked the ventilation. That never again mindset, call it sisu with a spreadsheet, permeates. Civic groups train on weekends. Companies have wartime contracts. Government drills logistics, fuel, cyber, and comms as if a storm is always offshore. Finland doesn't plan to be surprised. It plans to surprise. Start with artillery, because Finland does. It fields Western Europe's strongest artillery arm, roughly 1,500 tubes and launchers by Finnish counting, now anchored by modern K9 Thunder self-propelled guns and a fleet of M270 MLRS launchers being upgraded to M270A2 standard. Add counter-battery radars and growing domestic ammunition production, and you have a country that can shape the battlefield long before you see the first muzzle flash. Russia has learned, painfully, what happens when the other side can find and outrange your guns. Finland is that lesson with better roads and colder weather. Overhead, the story gets sharper. Finland is acquiring 64 F-35A Lightning II stealth fighters to replace its aging Hornets. The aircraft are more than jets. They're sensors that turn airspace into data, knitting ground and sea units into one picture and one firing solution. When the first Finnish F-35s reach home bases and hit initial operational capability, the deterrent signal will be unmistakable. In northern skies cluttered with Russian radar, someone will always see first. Someone will always shoot first. And if you're the one being seen, you won't like it. Hey, air defense is layered like birch bark. Finland operates NASAMS for short to medium range defense, integrates national sensors with NATO's broader network, and in 2023 moved to buy the Israeli-designed David Sling system for high-end interception. Picture an attacker's air plan as a checklist: drones, cruise missiles, strike sorties, maybe ballistic threats. Now imagine checking no next to most of those boxes. That's what a smart, multi-tier air defense buys you. Fewer surprises and more survivability for the stuff that wins wars: your logistics, command posts, and runways. At sea, Finland doesn't chase tonnage. It chases traps. Fast missile boats in the Hamina class hide among archipelagos and appear where the bathymetry does you no favors. Sea mines, a Finnish specialty, can turn narrow Baltic lanes into anxiety. And ashore, mobile coastal missile batteries, using the MTO-85M, Finland's designation for RBS-15, with a new generation of coastal strike missiles arriving under the PTO 2020 program, can close straits and write no-wake zone on the horizon for an adversary's frigates. The doctrine is elegant. Let the coastline do the work. We'll just add the teeth. Finland's navy is like a chess grandmaster who prefers knights and bishops to queens. Not flashy, but every move ruins your weekend. The border guard, police in peacetime, soldiers in war, slots into Finland's order of battle as scouts, raiders, and guides who know every culvert and checkpoint by heart. Their role in wartime planning isn't ornamental, it's asymmetric. They can turn an occupied road into a rumor and an enemy supply run into a short story with a bad ending. If an attacker imagines capturing border posts as a prelude to stabilization, Finland imagines those posts as the first of many places where the invader will start to feel very, very alone. All of this connects back to the Finnish way of fighting: deny air superiority, punish logistics, use reserves to multiply force, and fight from the forest outward. An invader who cannot control the air and cannot trust the roads is an invader who cannot maneuver. That's not theory, that's math. In April 2023, Finland didn't just join a club, it changed the map. NATO's accession ceremony in Brussels was brief, the flag rose quickly, and on a single day the alliance's frontier with Russia nearly doubled. What used to be a unilateral deterrent, Finland's credible promise to make an invasion hurt, became a multilateral guarantee. Attack Finland and you're at war with the most powerful alliance on Earth. Russia's calculus shifted from, can we intimidate Helsinki, to, do we really want Article 5 blinking red in the high north? Spoiler, they do not. That strategic geometry slices both ways. St. Petersburg, the jewel of Russia's northwest, sits roughly 300 kilometers from Helsinki, and the Kola Peninsula, home to Russia's northern fleet and a large share of its strategic submarine force, is within rapid reach of NATO air and surveillance, now backed by a Finnish land border that stretches for about 1,340 kilometers. In a crisis, those realities constrain Moscow's options. Start something here, and you invite pressure on the things you care about most. Of course, Moscow doesn't need tanks to probe. It has playbooks for pressure: migration waves pushed at border posts, GPS spoofing, infrastructure sabotage whispers, and cyber attacks that aim to harass rather than destroy. Finland has treated each as a rehearsal, not a crisis. When Russia facilitated irregular migration in late 2023 and into 2024, Finland closed entire crossings, built fences, rewrote procedures, and, controversially, adopted emergency measures to turn people away at the border. Some of those steps sparked legal debate. All of them signaled that the grey zone up north would not be a free playground. The side effect of Finland joining NATO is this: Russia now must consider heavier troop allocations along a much longer frontier to cover the length of Finland's forests. That ties down brigades and logistics Moscow might want elsewhere. It also complicates Russian exercises and reinforcement routes from the Leningrad Oblast to Karelia and up toward Murmansk. Strategy is about scarcity. Finland just made Russia feel it. Occasionally, someone waves the nuclear card, as if saying the word ends the discussion. It doesn't, especially not here. You don't need a PhD in meteorology to see why. The mid-latitudes are ruled by prevailing westerlies. Winds generally sweep from west to east, and the Baltic is notorious for moving weather with enthusiasm. Detonate a nuclear weapon against Finland, and the fallout doesn't politely stop at customs. It rides the wind, right back toward Russia's northwest heartland. St. Petersburg is too close. The Kola and the Neva are too vital. In other words, any such strike would be an act of self-harm masquerading as strategy. Bluff called. Next hand. Here's the unromantic truth of modern deterrence in Finland. It's a mosaic. Artillery that hits first, fighters that see first, air defenses that catch what gets through, coastal missiles and mines that make the Baltic a hedge maze, reserves that appear where you didn't expect them, shelters that keep civilians alive long enough for the counterattack, and NATO, looming over it all like a granite roof. You can ignore one tile in this mosaic. You cannot ignore the picture it makes. Let's go back to that column in the snow. In Finnish doctrine, you don't waste armor where trees are your bunkers and lakes are your moats. You disperse teams, stitch them together with radios and pre-planned fires, and collapse an enemy's timetable until their attack plan looks like a weather forecast. Cold, unpredictable, and wrong. You mine choke points. You let reconnaissance units, regular and border guard, hunt logistics nodes at night. You rotate fresh reservists through sectors while the attacker bleeds fuel, time, and morale. If the enemy tries to saturate with drones, you answer with camouflage, decoys, and short-range air defense. If they mass artillery, you counter battery faster than they expected. That is how a small population creates strategic depth. If you want to beat the Finns on skis, you'd better be Norwegian and you'd better bring snacks. Finland's Navy looks modest on a spreadsheet until you place it on the map. The Hamina-class missiles boats, the coming Pohjanmaa-class corvettes, the mine countermeasure fleet, the Pansio-class mine layers, and those mobile coastal missile batteries together make the Gulf of Finland and the archipelagos westward an ocean of sharp corners. The point isn't to sail farther, it's to make sure the opponent cannot. Sea denial, not sea control, wins here. In a war, the Baltic would quickly resemble a chessboard where every dark square is mined and every light square is in range. Good luck threading that needle under fire. NASAMS batteries tie into a wider sensor net, passing tracks to shooters with minimal human drama. David Sling adds altitude and speed envelopes that make cruise missile planners frown. Throw in manpads on the low end and fighter caps on the high, and you've layered the sky enough to ruin a playbook based on Russian massed fires and drone swarms. That's before you factor in NATO AWACS and allied interceptors willing to loiter in places that make any aggressor uncomfortable. Finland isn't trying to build an iron dome, it's building an iron headache for anyone who tries to take away its air. Helsinki's cavernous shelters are not museum pieces, they're living infrastructure. They host swimming pools and skating rinks in peacetime because Finns refuse to waste square meters. But the equipment, overpressure doors, air filters, generators, gets inspected, rules rehearsed, and conversion timelines drilled. Across Finland, public and private shelters can be stood up in hours. The psychology matters as much as the concrete. A population that knows where to go and what to do is a population that keeps its head when the lights flicker. And when civilians are protected, commanders make different decisions. They can be patient, they can be cunning, they can win. Let's flip perspectives. Suppose you're the Russian General Staff. You must guard the Kola and the Northern Fleet. You must deter NATO in the Baltics while absorbing casualties and equipment losses in Ukraine. You must watch St. Petersburg, your second city, sitting within reach of NATO aircraft, cruise missiles, and electronic eyes. You must do all of that while your border with NATO just doubled and your most immediate new neighbour is Finland, a country designed to make you overcommit and underperform. Hybrid tactics, migrant flows, drones at border cameras, cables cut under dark water, might seem cheaper, but Finland responds to those with the same cold efficiency it uses for everything else. Close the crossings, legislate the gaps, send patrols, and quietly ask NATO friends for more eyes and more logs. It's not flashy, it's effective. That's the theme here. 3 more quick beats on why can't invade is more than rhetoric. First, logistics. Even a limited thrust into southeastern Finland would run into a web of kill zones that chew fuel and men. Second, escalation. NATO's tripwire now runs along every Finnish mile. Third, politics. A failed offensive against Finland would not be a second Winter War or Russia. It would be a second embarrassment in as many campaigns. One last joke, because we promised 3 or 4. Invading Finland is like trying to surprise a librarian. Calm on the outside, but they already know which book you're looking for and they've hidden it. So why can't Russia invade Finland anymore? Because the equation has changed. The terrain that once bled the Red Army is now married to sensors, missiles, and a reserve system that turns civilians into capability on command. The bunkers are ready, the jets are coming, the guns are already here, the alliance is real, and the winds, if it ever came to madness, would carry fallout in the wrong direction. Finland doesn't boast, it doesn't need to. It simply makes aggression look like a bad investment. The border is long, The messages are longer, and the message is short. If you come, you will not stay. The rhetorical question writes itself. In a world of gambles and gambits, who wants to bet an army against a country that learned, 85 winters ago, how to make the forest fight back, and has been upgrading the forest ever since?